Welcome to another episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews, and today I have my special guest, Vijay Deol from enworld, the Chateau of enworld. Great pleasure. Vijay, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I've known Vijay for a number of years, and he's had a vast array of experience in leading in Japan. So he's leading a big organization today. So we want to tap into some of the things that he's learnt about being a leader in Japan. So could you tell us a little bit, Vijay, about your background, how you got to Japan, and what sort of businesses you've been running, and tell us about enworld.
Okay. Originally from a very small town in Canada. That's a very cold place in northern Alberta. I grew up there, went to university there, and decided to come to Japan because I wanted a year off after finishing my undergrad and university, thinking I was going to go back to Canada and apply to graduate studies or medical schools.
How many years ago are we talking now?
That was in 2002. So I came to Japan with the intention of being here for a year as an English teacher, just as a break, as a poor student who didn't have any money, a way to get paid to travel to an exotic place. But I got here on the JET program, which I don't know, some of your listeners might know of. It's called the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, organized by the Japanese government. Got stuck in a very small town in Kyoto, which was...
Is the JET program the reason you decided to come to Japan? I mean, you could have gone to Australia, you could have gone to Europe. Why Japan?
Well, really only two reasons. I wanted to go somewhere that in my opinion, was exotic. So different language, different culture, and Japan fit that description. And secondly, my friend had been here. So that's why it wasn't Korea or somewhere else like that. Yeah. But it was a really good luck that I went on the JET program, found myself in, the kind of cultural heart of Japan in Kyoto.
Oh, is that Kyoto itself or outside of Kyoto?
Kyoto
City?
Just outside of Kyoto City, a small town called Ujitawara-cho. So.
Which no one has probably ever heard of.
No, it's near Ujishi, which some people might have heard of, where it's famous for green tea. But yeah, so great, famous for green tea. Only foreigner in the town, so I had to study some Japanese. Really got immersed in traditional Japanese culture from the start. So it was a big learning curve, but it was a good learning experience, that's for sure. So I was there. I ended up deciding to stay a second year, and then in my second year, I got an email from a recruitment company called Wall Street Associates, basically saying, "Come to Tokyo, work in business." Very exciting kind of pitch that they had written to me, but it was essentially a spam message that they sent to all JET program participants. But I thought that sounds exciting. I wasn't really ready to go back to Canada yet. Applied for the job, and I got the job. So started as a consultant focusing on finance and accounting positions, and Wall Street Associates was the company that later got acquired by Japan and became enworld. So I was here from 2004 until 2012 and was reasonably successful as a recruitment consultant, so got the opportunity to be a manager and continued to get to manage larger teams and grow teams. And
how big were those teams you were managing at that time?
So I guess the first team that I managed was about 4 or 5 people, and then continued to grow or to manage additional teams through 2012 when I was a sales director here, and I had about 40 or 50 people under me in total, and we were responsible for about half the company's revenue. And then I actually decided to leave the company at that time, and I was headhunted by a British multinational recruitment firm that wanted to start up here. So I decided to take quite a big risk, I think, and took that job.
As the president?
As the president for Japan. So I was their first employee in Japan, and was in a serviced office literally alone by myself on day one, tasked with growing that business. So. But in retrospect, it was a really good decision, I think, because it was a big learning experience. It was a big risk, but it paid off because I was able to, first of all, take the opportunity to manage the entire P&L of the business. Learned a lot about, not just sales, but actually managing other parts of the business and general management. So we grew that business to, I think we were about 30 people at the time that I left.
That was from what year to what year?
2012 until 2017. Mm-hmm. So I was there for almost 5 years. And I left because I got asked to come back to enworld. So I came back here in 2017.
So reverse headhunting.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd always kept a good relationship with the people here. And I think, we have great people here, which is why I didn't want to leave on bad terms or anything. So always maintain the relationships. And They had gone through some changes in their senior management around 2016, and they were looking for some new leadership. So they asked me to come back, and I started in enworld again in February 2017. So I've been back almost 3 years.
So when you got back, I think you said it was about 40 odd people when you left, 40, 50 people when you left, and you come back, and how many people was it when you got back?
Yeah, so I was managing 40 or 50 at the time. Right, I think we were a little over 100 at that time. Mm-hmm. When I came back, we were about 250. Okay. And now we're about,
and you're the president again?
So I'm the president for Japan. I oversee all of our Japan business. And we're now about 350 in Japan. And I manage some of our regional businesses as well. So Thailand and Australia also report into me.
Okay, so that's a big jump, isn't it?
It is a big jump, yeah.
So when you first got into leading, you had your 4-person team, and then it gets larger and larger. What were some of the challenges you found as a leader? Because you've got a couple of different challenges there in terms of small team to big team, and then to really big team later. So tell us about some of the early challenges, and then some about the later challenges at a bigger scale.
I think the early challenges, with my first opportunity to manage people, there were challenges just in terms of getting the respect of the people so that you could, give them direction. So I had people who were older than me, who were in the business longer than me. I was managing both men and women. I was managing people, both Japanese and Australian, British, all different kind of nationalities.
Now, how do you get that respect? How do you get people to follow you?
Yeah, good question. I think part of it is, you have to be willing to perform yourself, right? So, I was very much a playing manager. There was nothing I would ask my team to do that I wasn't willing to do myself. And I also, maintained high standards for myself so I could demand high standards from the team. I think that was the really important thing to start with. I think, communication is always a really important one, and, being open and being transparent. Being, someone that you can have your team ask questions to, being there for them, being able to rely on you. All of those things are really important. When you're managing a small team, it's, can be very much like, they're your group of friends, they're your family, so you need to have a very kind of close relationship with them, I think, in order to be able to lead them. But it definitely changes, as you get larger teams and large organizations to manage.
When you got to 40 or 50, you're obviously working through section heads by that time. Yeah. You're not managing 40, 50 people directly yourself. Now, you've got someone between you and them.
Yeah.
What changed for you as a leader when you had to start working through others?
Yeah, well, I think that's probably the biggest jump when you get bigger management opportunities, from managing everyone in your division directly and then to having people in between, layers of managers where you have to manage people who are managing other people. So that's definitely a big jump. And I think, well, first and foremost is making sure you have the right people in those layers, because there's no way that you can monitor every single detail of what's happening under them. So you have to give up a certain amount of control, and that has to come with a certain amount of trust and reliance on the people that are under you. So that balance of control and trust needs to be.
Were you able to select those people yourself, or were they selected for you? Because that's a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah. In most cases, fortunately, I was able to select them myself. Mm-hmm. I guess until I came back to enworld, when obviously a lot of those people were in place and a lot of those layers existed. So I had to inherit that. Yeah.
And on those selections that you made, were they all successful, or did you discover, geez, I thought that person would be great in this role, but in fact they weren't great in this role and I had to move them out? Or did you find that your selection process yourself wasn't too bad? You pretty much got it right.
I think if any leader you talk to tells you that they were right every single time, they're probably lying. So I think any leader in any size of organization who's successful has failed. So I definitely made mistakes in some cases, but I think, you learn from those mistakes, and for the most part, if you're getting the majority of the decisions right in terms of the people that you've got in certain roles within an organization, that's what you have to hope for. Yeah.
Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. When you went from an established organization leading that 40, 50 people, and you get to select the section heads and you get all that working for you, and then it's all humming along nicely, and then you jump out and you have to go back to zero again and start from nothing, and then you have to build that up. What were some of the challenges? It's like a startup, isn't it, really? It's a start from scratch, launch an organization in Japan as opposed to coming into an established business. What was challenging for you as a leader to make that, again, move to almost a startup style of business?
There's a lot of different challenges. I think, first of all, going to a business that's completely unknown, doesn't have any, brand recognition in the market, attracting people to work with you, it's more challenging, right? You really have to be able to tell the right story to them so they understand, what they're getting themselves into, so that they get excited about it, even though it's hard to, visualize in a concrete way. And then I think the other thing is, having come from an organization where I'd been working for 8 years, I had a lot of credibility. I had a track record. Everybody knew what my results were in this organization. Moving to the new organization, nobody knows about that other than what maybe I tell them, and it's not as powerful as people who've been there and seen the teams that I've managed or the results that I've produced. So it was kind of going back to square one to rebuild credibility and get people invested in the business and in working with me. That was a big challenge, I think, in the first couple of years there.
At that time, it was probably a little bit easier, perhaps, to recruit people to come on board than now. We've got 1.6 jobs available for everyone looking for a job. We've got population decline. A lot of industries are saying we don't have enough people. Was it a case of there was a sufficient pool of people to recruit at that time or not?
Japan's been a candidate short market for a long time. So, it's gradually continuing to get more extreme, but it certainly wasn't easy to find people then. So it was a matter of, just approaching a lot of people, meeting a lot of people. So a very high volume kind of approach to, even grow from, 1 to 5 or 5 to 10.
Now you turn up back at here as enworld, big organization, Japanese owners. How was that adapting? Was there an adaptation needed to that, or what was the sort of challenges of now working in a Japanese-led, in the sense of owned organization?
I think, for myself, it's maybe been easier than, let's say, an expat who comes in, 15 years into their career and it's their first opportunity to be in Japan. My career is almost entirely developed in Japan, so I feel like I've got a good understanding of the market here and therefore how Japanese business works, but definitely still a learning experience, interacting with our parent company, who are effectively my bosses. But I think it's been more positive than anything because the parent company's, philosophy is nyuushago katsuyaku, and we've adopted that as enabling success in English. And I think that mission for our company to make people successful is it's a differentiator. A lot of, I don't know of any recruitment companies that think about their business with that as their priority. So as long as we're on the same page with that philosophy and that mission, it's been very constructive working with the Japanese parent company. And also, they've got an excellent brand in Japan and amazing resources, so we can really leverage that. And I think it's something that, no other, at least foreign company working here in our industry has the opportunity to do.
So is that enabling success focused on the staff, or is that focused on the client? Where is that aimed at?
It should be focused on everybody. So first and foremost, our customers, who are our clients and candidates. But if we can make our customers successful, then we're going to be successful ourselves. That's the relationship. But ultimately, we want to enable success of people we work for and people who are working with us.
So one of the typical things in companies, you have these brilliant vision statements and mission statements and blah blah blah, and no one can remember them. Like you, as a training company, if we go into companies, we often take them off the wall, turn them around, and ask the people in the training room, what's the vision of the company? What's the mission of the company? What are the values of the company? And they usually get, collectively, they usually get about 2 out of the 5 values and nothing else.
Right.
So if I walk out of here and I go next door and I go and ask someone, what's the vision for the company? What's the mission, values? Would they know it?
I want to say yes. I think we're pretty good about that, actually. I think if you asked anybody what our vision was, they might not necessarily get verbatim what's on the website, but I'm sure they would get the crux of it, which is to be the most respected partner in the global talent market. Our mission, in order to achieve that vision, is enabling success. And I bet you every single person in our company can get that one. Yeah.
And how do you, again, every company likes to think that everyone has got the message. Mm-hmm. How do you make sure they actually do have the message? Because now you've walked back in, it was 200, 250, now it's 350. You're at the top, they're at the bottom. How do you know that the people at the bottom are actually getting it? What do you do internally to drive that philosophy to make sure everyone really understands and lives the philosophy and works according to that philosophy?
Well, I think everybody would be able to repeat the words enabling success, but I think where, in any company, you're going to have a different kind of connection between the words that describe the mission and what people actually feel and understand from that when they come into work every day. And I don't think we're any different. So it's a constant effort as a leadership team to get people aligned to that message and get people excited about that message.
How do you do that?
So I think we do a lot of different things. I mean, part of it is our training, part of it is the induction process, part of it is who we hire, but it's also built into how we get feedback from our customers and how we share that internally. So we do things like NPS surveys. We also have technologies that our parent company has developed to understand how successful our candidates that we've placed are being, or how well they're doing at the companies they're working at. And we collect that data and we share it and we communicate it. We also have a number of different forums internally where we try to get feedback. So
is it like town hall type of things?
Not exactly town halls. So for example, the most recent iteration of this is what we call an ambassador group. So I think we've got about 20 odd people who have volunteered to participate as ambassadors, and their job is to be, I guess, a vehicle to communicate between senior management and the general company. So we have done feedback surveys where people can log in on a link that they're sent and give ideas or give feedback on whether they think things are going well or things that need to improve. And then the ambassador group will collect that and we'll share it and discuss it and follow up on which things we need to drill down into further. So there's a lot of these kind of constant efforts in improving our communication, not just what we communicate to the market or what I'm saying in a kickoff in my speech to the company, but on a daily basis, and how we're trying to solicit the feeling of the room in the office to guide us on how we can improve connection to our mission of enabling success.
So do you run, as a Japanese organization, well, now you're actually international because you're outside of Japan as well. I think you have an opportunity maybe to do engagement type of surveys or satisfaction type of surveys for the team. Do you run those?
So we do engagement surveys in Japan. We've not done them in our regional offices, at least the ones that I manage. So, but in Japan, yes.
How have they gone?
I think they've gone pretty well. I think we are probably better than the benchmarks in our industry. I don't have visibility on exactly how Japanese based recruitment companies fare when it comes to engagement surveys, because we use international companies to facilitate, and then I guess we get kind of benchmarks against global data. But I actually think we're pretty good, and it's a constant effort to improve because we definitely get a lot of constructive feedback in those surveys. I don't think any company has every single person 100% engaged, but definitely I think we're better than the majority when it comes to that.
So you mentioned about your ambassadors. Is there also some transparency around the content of the engagement surveys? For example, if there were a number of particular issues, would people then know that as a result of the survey, we've identified these are particular issues, we're working on these, our ambassadors are going to go to work on these and drill a bit deeper, and we're going to roll out some solutions so that it's very clear to people, I gave my feedback, something will happen as a result, as opposed to what often happens is, I gave my feedback, nothing changed. So what do you do here to make sure that people feel, okay, my contribution is actually going to result in a change?
Yeah, well, I mean, arguably we're too transparent sometimes,
really?
I think.
Okay.
So for our most...
Why is that? Why do you say true transparency?
Well, I mean, it's how you communicate results of an engagement survey or a feedback survey. It can be sensitive, right? So you have to be delicate with it. And, we're not perfect. So I think there have been times when we've communicated results of these things that, maybe one department or another felt targeted more than they should have been. But at the end of the day, we are very transparent. I think we're pretty open in how we communicate these things. So, we've never had a case where we communicated the results of a feedback survey, and I had somebody tell me, well, I'm leaving or resigning because of this. So I think it's always been an instigator to work harder to improve in a certain way. And that is one of our core values as well, as continuous improvement. So I think people here, they do understand that. They understand why we do it. And if, somebody's not happy about something, hopefully they feel, that they can share that and action will be taken. And, I think we've solved a lot of problems. We are continuously looking at ways we can get better. So I hope that, that's understood across the business.
How do you continuously look at ways to get better? What do you do about that? Because everyone wants to get better. We all believe in Kaizen or, jump improvements, etc. But actually, how do you do that?
Well, I mean, so one of the things is these kind of groups like the Ambassador Group, just so we can understand, where we need to get better. I think we also, we do a lot of, we look at the market a lot, and we I talk to a lot of my peers in the industry. Our parent company does a lot of market research. We're always looking at the investor relations reports from our competitors and things like that to try to identify, where we can get better, where there's other companies that maybe we are not performing as well at, or where there's technologies that we can implement that we can apply to our business. So I think there's just a constant investigation of where we can get better. And I think we do, we are action oriented, so I don't like to sit in a meeting room and have a bunch of ideas and come out of it without doing anything. So I think we definitely are focused on actually taking action. If there is a good idea, we'll try it. And if it doesn't work, fine, but if you haven't given it a shot, then you're not going to know, right?
So those competitors' investor relations reports, what are you looking for inside those reports?
Probably looking at things like, their productivity, their profitability, the metrics that measure how efficiently they're running as a business and benchmarking ourselves against that. We'd also be looking at things like, what sectors, for example, they're performing well in, which markets geographically they're performing well in. Which business models are working well for them, whether it's contract or permanent recruitment or things like that. So, those would be the things I'd look for in a competitor's report.
So you come back here, it's 250 now, 350 people. You've got a whole raft of middle managers, none of whom probably you selected, or maybe back in the day there might be a couple of people left over who are still there, but the majority of people are not your selection, they're your predecessor's selection. And again, yes, you were here, but when you were here, it was 100 people. Now we're huge. How do you go about re-establishing yourself inside a company of that scale?
Well, first of all, actually, a lot of them were people who I worked with before, and some of our middle managers are actually people that I hired right before I left as a junior associate consultant, and they were able to become successful as a consultant and eventually became a manager. So there's actually a surprisingly good retention, I think, of our top talent, and has been the case for when I came back. But I didn't necessarily manage them in the capacity that they're working in now. So it has made it easier, but it's definitely has its challenges. How did I reestablish myself in the business here, and I guess earn that credibility and that trust from them? Well, I think, when I first came back initially, there's, and probably any kind of book like First 90 Days or things like that you read, try to get a few quick wins. So try to do some small things that demonstrate some improvement so people understand, I'm here to make things happen and things will get done. That earns some short-term initial credibility that you can build on. Other than that, I think it's, spending time listening. When I came back initially, the first month, all I did was sit down with every single manager and understand, what's their role, what's their expectations, what's their challenges, what they wanted me to do to support them. So it was a lot of listening. And then I think it's, just being consistent and being accountable. So if, there's a request for something that people want from you, being straightforward with, how much you can deliver on that, and then actually doing what you say you're going to do. So I think, the accountability goes a long way, and it's super important for any leader. If you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, immediately people aren't going to care what you say next time. Right?
And how do you build the bench strength of your middle managers? I mean, years ago, when it was, actually just changed to enworld, we did some training for the middle manager group on how to be a leader. So how do you today, with such a bigger, how many leaders would you have here, which we call middle management? You must have a lot.
Around 40 in sales, I guess, maybe 45 across the whole business. They were talking middle managers.
So how do you develop that group of people to scale with the business? Because you talk about going even larger than 350. What are you doing to develop that group?
Well, when I first came back, we did engage an external consulting firm to have a look at our management training processes and to try to enhance them. And I think it worked pretty well. And we didn't want to rely on an external firm forever. So we fully had the intention of learning what we could from that project and bringing it in-house. We moved one of our very talented sales managers into a role in what we call commercial excellence now, and that was partly on his request, but we were very happy for him to move into that role because he's a very smart guy and very methodical and structured in how he goes about things. So he was tasked with taking what we could learn from that project with the consulting firm and bringing it in-house and developing our own management training systems. And in addition to that, we've strengthened our learning and development team. So we've hired some who I think are really talented people to support our commercial excellence manager. And we still use external resources that allow people to learn. So for example, I think we're one of the biggest users of LinkedIn Learning. I would be pretty confident we're the biggest user of any recruitment company in Japan for LinkedIn Learning, for example. So yeah, it's investing in the right people, the right resources, so that, again, people can continuously improve and continue to learn.
And you've got quite a mixed work population here. I'm sure if we looked around, it probably looks like a reflection of the UN,
Yeah.
with so many nationalities here. How many nationalities would you have out there now?
Good question. I probably should know the right number, but
well, just say a number. We'll go with that number.
We've got to be 20 or 30, maybe more.
Right.
Yeah.
So the point I'm getting to is you've got a fairly diverse workforce. Yeah. Japanese, foreigners. What are the challenges of managing a fairly diverse workforce?
First of all, there's diversity both in a nationality, also in gender, age. So, everybody in the company has, different demands on their life, has different expectations for their career. So that presents, any number of challenges, right? Whether it's, providing flexible working arrangement for a working mother, or whether it's providing, the right incentive scheme for somebody who really just wants to be a high-performing salesperson and doesn't necessarily want to be a manager of people, or whether it's somebody who's not money motivated and and really needs to be bought into the purpose and the vision of the business. You have to be able to juggle all of those things and try to strike the chord with everybody in the organization to maintain engagement and keep everybody moving in the same direction. Yeah, so it's very challenging.
I'm sure it is. And the flip side of that diversity, though, is creativity. Because in Japan, we have a lot of group think. They talk about every single person had the same textbooks at school. Every single person in the whole country had exactly the same textbooks. They read exactly the same media. They all tend to have this fit in as a group. Groupthink is very dominant. Yet, often with modern organisations, we're looking for innovation, we're looking for creativity. That's where diversity helps, to have different viewpoints, different experiences, different angles on ideas. How do you find that diversity as a tool for you to develop ideas and creativity?
Well, I think we are quite deliberate whenever we put a project team together, or whenever there's a new initiative like our ambassador group or other kind of simpler sales projects, things to drive more referrals, for example, or whenever we're running an off-site kind of strategy session with our managers, we're very deliberate to make sure that we don't just have one typical profile leading that. We'll try to make sure we've got some Japanese and some non-Japanese. Where we can, we'll try to have both female and both male, both experienced and less experienced people. So I think that's something that we really try to push. In addition to that, we've got a number of principles that we operate by. One of the ones, for example, is what we call swing the bat. So we went through a hackathon style exercise 2 years ago now to develop several principles for our business, more kind of day-to-day practical guidelines for how to do your business that fit with our mission of enabling success.
How does it work as a hackathon? How do those things connect together?
So we got all of our managers into a room for a whole day, and basically this commercial excellence manager of ours structured the day where we're going to go through certain exercises. We're going to arrive at X number of principles at the end of the day that we're going to then be able to apply to our business the following day. We didn't actually finish it in one day, so we took them away and we refined them a little bit after that. So it wasn't exactly like a hackathon works, but that's how we called it. But the outcome, I think, was really good. So swing the bat, for example, was one of them, and the intention is, it just means you're not going to hit a home run unless you take a swing, right? So you have to try things in order to succeed. So that's the intention of that, right? So we have several kind of initiatives like that, several kind of guidelines like that, and it's all tied into our training and our how people run their team meetings, how we run our kickoffs or our monthly sales meetings, things like that.
So swing the bat, for example, it's a bit of an irony because baseball is such a popular game here, but Japanese organizations tend to deter people from swinging the bat. Because they're encouraged to fit in. When they're in any type of group situation, they're looking at who's older than me, who's male, who's female, who joined the company before I did, before they'll talk or speak up. When you're doing creativity sessions, you're looking for ideas. So I'm just wondering, are your hackathons or your idea creativity areas tending to be dominated by non-Japanese who are more likely to speak up because Japanese tend to be a little bit more shy about speaking up, a little bit more self-contained?
Well, I think we're very different than a typical Japanese company. So I think we have much more Western cultural influences than most Japanese companies because of our history of actually being started by a couple of British guys and generally having a large proportion of non-Japanese in the business. I'd be lying if I said there weren't these kind of cultural norms that crop up and you need to be aware of them. So I think, our Japanese, associate consultant who joined the business last month, probably unlikely he's going to come over to my desk and say, "Hey, Vijay, I've got a great idea for you." So I think we do try to encourage people speaking up if we can create a facility that they can do it anonymously or in a non-threatening way. So we do a lot of these, like I said, online kind of surveys. We have done, for example, in our kickoff meetings, Q&A sessions where people can use an internet tool. They scan a QR code and they can submit their question anonymously. So things like that, we do.
Is it live?
Live, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're up there. Up come the questions.
We moderate the questions so there's nothing inappropriate.
Okay.
And actually we use a system where people can vote. So the question that becomes the most popular comes to the top. But and I mean, some of them been challenging questions that are difficult to answer on the spot. But I think it's a good opportunity to make sure that we're understanding the voice of all of our business. But I do think we coming back to the question about our creativity sessions or the sessions we have that we want to drive creativity, are they dominated by the non-Japanese? I actually think no. We've got a lot of really smart Japanese people who are often educated in the West or have worked in Western companies, speak good English. So they tend to be as outspoken as a lot of our Westerners, I would say. So maybe we're just fortunate in that we've selected people wisely in that capacity.
Often with creativity, swing the bat, try something new. Japan has got a very strong no mistake culture, no defect culture. And so that tends to hold people back from trying things that might fail. And so how we treat failure becomes a very great indicator of how much freedom you've got to actually try and fail, if may fail, but to try. How do you encourage people to take a swing of the bat and, hey, if it fails, that's okay, it's not the end of your career. How do you get that idea through to people to encourage them to actually try harder, to think harder, think more innovatively, come up with more ideas?
Well, I think we do try things as a company and sometimes they don't work. So I think we're honest about that. We had an initiative last year that I was driving that it just didn't work very well. And I got up in front of the company when we had decided to stop that initiative. And I said, look, it didn't work. It was my initiative, but I was wrong about it. It didn't work. So I think setting that example is helpful. But I also think, because our core values include continuous improvement, we've always been a company that, we don't take a kind of a harsh stance. Nobody gets yelled at because they did something wrong, So I think it's
plenty of Japanese companies don't operate on that basis. Plenty of Japanese companies, a lot of yelling going on if you do something wrong.
Yeah, I really think we don't have that built into our culture here, and it goes back to the kind of core values that we've had from day one.
What are the core values? So, is it a number you can remember, or is it a massive number? What are you talking
There's
about?
5 of them. It's continuous improvement, customer service, quality, teamwork, and integrity.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the core of how we should do our work every day here.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We should be demonstrating those values in everything that we do.
Mm-hmm. And have you found that a lot of innovation has come from the team? For example, you've got a big number of people here. You've got a large, diverse group. Theoretically, it should be just brimming with innovation and ideas. Is it actually turning into a flow like that for you, or not so much?
Well, we're not a tech startup. We're not developing new, software solutions that we're putting out to the market every day. End of the day, recruitment, the mechanics of it really haven't changed in the last, at least in my experience in the career. You've had somebody who wants to hire and somebody who's looking for a job, and you have to get them together. Now, obviously, there's a lot of tools. There's a lot of kind of digital ways that it's changing the business in terms of how you attract candidates. There's a lot of tools that companies are trying to employ to match candidates and use AI and things like that. So I think the technology side of it is where we actually have to be looking at other vendors and looking at what's available on the market and how we can utilize it. It's not things that we're actually developing ourselves. As far as innovation,
but even that thought, for example, of using some sort of facial recognition technology, for example, I'm making this up, but where they can analyse the person's reactions in terms of reaction to questions and judge their degree of confidence or whatever when they do that, and then make a judgment between candidates. All this AI-enabled technology is leading that way in a lot of industries, including the recruitment industry. But the fact of someone thinking like that, saying maybe we could go to that stage, as opposed to the leadership team thinking it, I guess is where I was sort of coming from.
Yeah, I don't think every single person in our company is exploring, different tools that are on the market, but there's certainly, I get things in my inbox. Someone's, said, "Hey, Vijay, what about this? This looks really cool." But I do think we have, a lot of people who just want to make the company better. So, we have an initiative right now to drive more referrals, and I don't think it's revolutionary, but it is innovation in terms of how they're trying to approach it and how they're trying to get people to think differently. And this was driven by a selection of our middle managers. It wasn't anything that, I demanded or that our senior leadership asked of. So people, I think, are proactive about sharing their ideas, and if they're good ideas, then we'll try to, create a structure where they can implement them.
And were those middle managers celebrated for that? Because often people do good work and we sort of think, well, that's part of your job, get with it. And we don't actually take the trouble to recognise good work. And here's a group of people of their own initiative have said, hey, listen, why don't we have this referral program? They've sold it up to senior management and you've said, yeah, that's great, let's do it. What do you do about recognising those people?
Well, I think for anybody who's got a good idea that we want to utilize, we do try to recognize them. We have a monthly meeting every month, and I stand up there and make sure I point out who's been working hard or who's done a good job. With this particular group, they had the opportunity to present in front of the whole company themselves. So, like I said, in that context, it's very transparent, very open. company. So I do think, we try hard to recognize hard work and recognize good work. Again, we're not perfect at it. There's always times when somebody points out, hey, why didn't we mention that guy? But it's a constant effort to get better. So.
And what about, often in an industry like yours, the financial rewards are very high, relatively speaking, compared to most industries, for age and stage. Like at a young age, people in your company are earning a lot of money relative to their same peers who in a different industry. Is that the only indicator that really is there to stimulate people, or do you have things, or is that enough? Is that sufficient because the money's so big, or do you do other things as well, or do you need to do other things as well?
I think you do need to do other things. So, I mean, first of all, the opportunity to earn a lot of money exists in recruitment, but not everybody does, right? So it's the top billers who are paid really, really well. The thing that a lot of people like about this business, at least if you're in sales, is that it's very much reward for results. It doesn't matter seniority, how old you are, how long you've been in the company. Somebody who just started and bills X amount in this quarter, if it's more than the guy who's been here 10 years, he's going to earn more, right? So people like that about this industry, but I definitely think, and especially, in the last 10 years or so, it's changed a lot. As with Millennials or Generation Z, you're getting a lot more people who are not as money oriented. Money's always important, and you need to pay competitively and you need to pay fairly, but that's not going to be enough to differentiate you from another business, even if you're in an industry that the earning opportunity is quite high, because our competitors can also offer high earning opportunity. That's why having a mission that people can buy into, and I think our mission of enabling success does resonate with a lot of people in our company and excites them about coming to work, and they realize that the byproduct of that is the big commission check that they earn. That's not necessarily what they are chasing. They're chasing the opportunity to make their customers successful, and if they do that well, then the money will come.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Apart from that sort of chasing money aspect, what are some other things you've noticed about younger people, millennials or whatever, coming in the workforce who are now turning up in your pool of workers that are actually different? And you notice, well, actually, that's a bit different from what I would have expected or what I've seen before. What are the differences that you've noticed?
Well, I mean, we talked about engagement surveys. In the engagement surveys that I've been through, both in this company and my previous company, we tend to rank things like what's most important to you in your job. And if we'd done that survey 15 years ago, probably in any recruitment company, money or earning potential probably would be number one. Now it's like 6 or 7. And things that come up consistently in the last few years, I think, as the highest priorities are opportunity to learn, opportunity to develop, opportunity to work in an independent and flexible way. So basically people want to have kind of more control over their own destiny, let's say, but also have the opportunity to do something purposeful and to learn and develop themselves while they're doing it.
So it sounds like they need to have a strong sense of direction of where the company is going, a vision that really resonates with them, but also a fair bit of latitude about how they actually do the job is what I'm hearing from that
absolutely.
feedback.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of companies, out there have probably got a middle management group who are either micromanagers or do no managing at all and just leave people on their own. There's a few lessons in there, I imagine, about retaining people in terms of creating a work environment that's attractive, that people will say, no, I want to stay here. I don't want to move.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in our industry, one of the most common kind of catchphrases you'll hear is that people don't leave companies, they leave bosses, right? So, yeah, if you've got a manager who's too much of a micromanager and is not supporting their staff to develop and learn and find purpose in their work, and they're just demanding certain tasks be done and certain outputs or KPIs be met, you're going to have higher turnover, you're going to have a less engaged team, you're going to have lower results overall in the long term for sure.
It's sort of interesting in your business because you're actually seeing the full spectrum across all industries of these sorts of trends. Are there any sort of macro trends that you've also noticed in the last couple of years, apart from millennials and they're sort of having a different requirement to previous generations?
Well, that's a big one. I think millennials or just a younger generation of people having different motivations than older generations or more experienced members of the workforce. But macro trends, I do think you're seeing, and this I think is global, companies prioritizing more and more engagement with their workforce. Right, companies investing a huge amount of money and effort and resources to retain people, to make sure people are engaged, to make sure people, are excited about coming to work. I think in any industry, companies now realize that, just as much as investing in your R&D and having the right technology, having the right people, retaining the right people, making sure those people are motivated is as important, if not more important.
Yeah. And I guess, you think about the questions I've asked you so far. We've covered a fairly broad range of areas. Are there any questions I should have asked you about leading which I've not?
Any questions you should have asked me about leading? I think we didn't really cover maybe, let's say, what's different about Japan specifically. Okay. And I think I was thinking about that before this interview and actually made a presentation to a group of MBA students in Nagoya recently about job seeking in Japan. So if your audience is mostly expats, then they might be interested. I do think one of the comments, and this wasn't from me, this was from somebody who helped me put the presentation together, was don't try to change Japan, or don't try to fix Japan, because Japan's not broken, and especially if you're a Westerner who comes in here with a very Western mindset and doesn't understand how this country works first, it's easy to think that's weird, that doesn't make sense, and try to fix everything. You're not going to get very far with that. I also think for expat leaders who are coming in here, be very careful about assuming that what you've just discussed is actually going to happen, or if somebody said, yes, I'll do that, they will do it.
Why is that?
Because there is a tendency for conflict to be avoided, for heads to be nodded when it's just like, I'm going to nod my head to get out of this meeting and nothing's actually going to happen after that. So you do have to be careful about assuming what's been discussed is actually going to be actioned.
How can people get away with that? I mean, you are in a position of accountability, you're in a meeting, something's been agreed, you've nodded your head, but you don't execute on your part of that judgment or that part of that agreement. How does that work? Why aren't people sort of brought to justice on, hey, you were supposed to do your job, you haven't done your job here,
There's two reasons that come to mind, because we work with a lot of foreign companies, right? And when I was a recruitment consultant, I used to talk to a lot of expat, executives who would come here. And I think two things come to mind. One is it just never gets inspected or followed up on by the manager, right? So, and it's not easy to do that. It creates more work for yourself, and it's easier just to forget about things sometimes than to check if they've been done. So that's definitely part of it. But I think the other thing is that the expats come and go in Japan, and there is definitely a sentiment, I think, amongst some people working in Japan, some Japanese who are going to work the entire career with one company, that if I just wait out this guy's 3-year term here, then I don't have to worry about it anymore, and they'll do that. They'll just outlast the expats. So that's why it happens, I think. Well, there's also a difficulty to manage very strictly here. There's labor laws are very much in favor of the employee. You can't fire somebody because they didn't do what you asked them to do. You have to then help them improve, and you have to, it's a big effort that's required. So it's a big challenge for expat managers, but I think if they're careful about not just assuming that conversation is going to be actioned in this first place, and conscious of how they need to follow up and monitor on it, then it'll help them along.
Well, just let's segue then into, if you were going to give some advice, apart from what you've already just told me, in addition to that, some advice to a person who's about to be sent to Japan on a posting, or they've just arrived here on a posting. They're going to be here for probably under 5 years because of the tax arrangements, usually. What would be some advice you'd give them about being a successful leader in Japan, in addition to what we've already talked about?
In addition to those things, I think one of the other things I would say is to, one, be patient. I think, it's a country, and the business culture here is one where decisions are very slow to be made. But I think if you're patient, once decisions are made, they're actually executed quite efficiently. So that's kind of the trade-off, I think.
So is Vijay patient?
I think so. I hope so. I've been in Japan a long time, so.
You weren't patient before, but you've learned to be patient after living here for so long.
Maybe.
Yeah. What else?
Be patient. The other things I've said about not making assumptions about the things getting done, not trying to fix things. I do think, in addition to that one, not trying to fix things, but also try to understand why things operate the way they do, because the system here can seem strange to a foreign, mindset, but once you understand the system and how it works and you work within it, you can understand that there's reasons for it and it's very efficient.
So, any additional pieces of advice apart from those?
Those would be the main ones that come to mind.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's been another great interview on leading in Japan, and I'd like to thank Vijay for being very transparent and open in his comments about what we need to be doing here. Japan is the third largest economy in the world. It is not broken. There's still a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot of room for improvement. There are many, many facets of this country which we haven't fully explored to make it more successful for our businesses. But Vijay's given us some guidance today to make that happen. So, Vijay, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Greg.
And please join us again for the next episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews.